Welcome to our next Fax Check. I'm with my old friend Adam Weinberg, the director of the Whitney Museum. Welcome, Adam.
It's great to see you, Josh.
Now, about a year ago, we had a very interesting, I think it was my first Zoom call, that was set up by my friend and client Devin Wenig, the ex-CEO of eBay, with you and your team about how to deal with the pandemic. It was probably April or March. What did he say? What did you hear?
It was a great conversation because I tried to bring in to meet different parts of our staff, leaders in different areas, and that introduction was a great introduction because he was approaching things in ways that we hadn't necessarily thought about it. And so first of all, at that point, I don't think any of us knew that we would be here 1 year later and the pandemic would be still winding on. I think at that point there was still this belief that maybe it was a series of months or something like that. But I think there were 2 or 3 takeaways. One takeaway was, don't waste a crisis, the Rahm Emanuel line, which I always think about, but he really, the idea of working almost at lightning speed, the idea to kind of get in gear, don't look backwards, jump in right now, take advantage of new possibilities of particularly online programming. And that's what, and we'd been sort of moving in that direction, and sometimes it's not so much that somebody tells you something totally new, but you need to hear it again from them in order to kind of give you the kind of urgency in the sense that you're right on. And this was at the point where people were just beginning to think about, now, Zoom is everything. And as you said, this was your first Zoom call. It was probably one of my first as well. And, he had this sense of moment and the idea of just jump into the moment and take advantage. And we've had basically what I call a bilingual institution this past year in terms of both online and in person. We were closed until August 20th. We've had only about 25% total attendance. We're only maxed at 25% attendance at any given time. So a huge number of our audience now members of our audience are everywhere. And so we're doing kids programs, we're doing artist programs, we're doing studio visits, we're doing patron programs. I even did a program with Marcus Samuelson, the chef, who, so we've really, a lot of book talks, all kinds of things.
Did you rethink who your audiences were, both the New York member kind of thing and the people who used to only dip in and out once a year or once a decade? Was that part of the conversation too?
It was part of the conversation. He raised the idea of, how do you monetize this, or would you monetize it? And he was raising. What he did is he raised questions. It was a 1-hour conversation. So what he did is he raised questions, and it was really planting seeds because, as I said, it was at the beginning of it, and I think it was a conversation that helped set us up for this year. It kind of started to frame some of the questions, and it made us realize that we had to jump in immediately and not wait.
And did you?
Yes, we did.
We're not coming back to the old normal. No. So what is the new? How will the Whitney be different in a better way from this year of awfulness, both for the certainly the health of the country, but for institution having to survive?
I think that what happens in these times is you say to yourself, what is essential? What's essential to your life, your friends, your family, your health? And I think it's the same thing with the institution. The Whitney's grown a lot in the last, 6 years. We're very pleased and proud of that growth. And what I mean about growth, I mean larger community, more engaged community. But I think this has caused us to really say, what is essential to the Whitney? What must we do versus what would we like to do?
What metrics do you personally use, and maybe your board or your staff use, to judge successes at the museum?
I think there are a number of different ones because there's, look, attendance is the really easy numerical one. But, it's not always numbers of people. I think it's kind of levels of engagement, which is hard to measure. A lot of these things are sort of intangible, I think it's a sense of also the diversity of the communities that are getting involved and how we start to get a sense of how that works. You know, there are measurements, but it has to be beyond ticket sales, because if the goal of a museum is simply ticket sales, that's not, that to me is not that meaningful in and of itself. And I think, we do questionnaires. We do it in this time, and we don't. But, we do analyze our audiences. We have online things. We have, we do interviews in the lobby. We really do, touch base with our audiences to see what they want. And we've had focus groups. We've had all kinds of things. And a lot of it is also, through engagement that you see in the press, in a way. And I don't mean whether it's how many good reviews you get, but are they talking about you, and what are they saying? And I don't mean that just from a PR point of view. What is the level of engagements that critics or writers are about? Are they really arguing about the content and the quality and the diversity of the work in a meaningful way?
One more museum question. So it's been a year, your budget's off, I don't know, 20 million, 50 million, whatever. Has the museum continued to collect, and how can it do that at the same time as dealing with the realities of a budget gap of tens of millions of dollars?
Yeah, it's hard. A couple of things. One is we have some designated endowments that are restricted for purchasing of works, and it's not a lot of money. We've actually always been fairly behind in actually that. And most of the money that we have for acquisitions comes from our acquisition committees, where the donors give us money, sit on the committees, and help us select, work with us in selecting the works, or in acquiring the works, I should say. And so those monies are designated, but it's not vast amounts of money, and we do continue to collect, and we felt really it was important to continue to do so, because right now artists need the money. And the one thing that that people forget is that the great majority of artists still struggle. It's not so easy. There are the stars, there are the people, but even well-known artists, who they don't sell as easily as one would think. And we felt it was important to continue to have acquisition committee meetings to buy the works, to get the money into the hands of the artists. And something else we did, which is, the Whitney started in the, early in the fall to pay artists when their works are shown from our permanent collection. And it represents a very small amount of actual dollars in terms of just percentage and everything. It really is not that great, and it's something we've been talking about for years. But part of the impetus in that was, artists who we acquire for the collection, their works get shown. We're often consulting with them about how you want it shown, or to do an interpretive guide, or to be, whatever. It takes a lot of time on their part every time.
So what is the fee they get when their work goes
I can't remember the exact amount. I could get it.
But ballpark, $1,000?
Yeah, something like that. And it's about, it's like, $500 or $1,000, and it's per show, not per work. And it came out that each year it was such a relatively small amount of money. And I think what it did, to me, it was symbolic that we don't take the artist for granted in all this. And to have that happen at a time when we know that the artist community is struggling. I've made a lot of studio visits online, and there obviously there's certain ways, the market better than I do. There's certain parts of the market that are just bananas, but there's a lot of the more grassroots stuff where it's just kind of crawling.
So I have two more questions to relate to that. It's certainly easy for me to sit here and disagree with Max's decision at the Met to sell $150 million worth of art to put into salaries and operating when they have such a big endowment and such a wealthy board. Aside from being politically correct in a colleague in this town, your thoughts on that?
I'm not going to say anything about what the Met's decision is. Has to be, and it's not about not wanting to just criticize a colleague. I like Max. I think every museum director right now is really challenged. I think every museum is. I mean, there were all, I'm reading today in the New York Times about, Detroit. It's like every day, institutions are under fire for one reason or other. And by the way, maybe with good reason in some respects, but I think each institution is its own ecosystem, and they have close to 2 million objects in their collection. We have 25,000 objects. People often think the Whitney's such a big museum. 25,000 objects collected over 90 years.
I think that's a good number, because that means you're paying attention more likely to each object. I see artists, every resume has collection of MoMA, and I think, great, but that's in a warehouse in Idaho, never to be seen. And is it really, I know it's important to the artist, but is it actually important to the viewing people that they're in that collection? With 25,000 objects, it's a kind of a greater signifier to be in the Whitney collection than in the Met or
MoMA. And so in our case,
I love you, MoMA, but sorry.
But in our case, when you think about it, I think, what's the number that we have? I think it's 3,000. I think it's around 3,000 artists in the collection, 2/3 of which are alive today.
That's a really small number. I applaud you for that.
It's not as big as you'd think, both in collection. The other thing is we don't deaccession the works of living artists. So you take those facts alone.
We both know private collectors with more stuff.
So I think absolutely. And what we're doing is, and I feel really fortunate, we're doing a strategic plan for the permanent collection. We got a grant from the Luce Foundation a couple of years ago. It's a 3-year process. And what we're doing is really saying, how did we collect historically? What are we collecting? Is it in depth? What is missing? What should be there? What are future directions? How is the money best spent? And also as part of that, we will look at, we don't do lots of deaccessioning, but we will look at where we might deaccession more. And I feel strongly that, we will do deaccessioning, and we will consider the idea of deaccessioning, using some portion of it for collection care. I'm open to the idea, but we're in the middle of the study, and my feeling is I would like, before we do anything major in terms of deaccessioning, finish the study. You don't launch a study and then all of a sudden start selling everything.
It's finding a solution to a problem that may not exist.
That's right. And also, too, people give us works with the intention in most cases that in perpetuity. So we can't take that lightly. I'm not saying that we shouldn't do it, but it really has to be something that we understand that, each of those works ended up there. There's some that are totally random, but by and large, those works ended up in 25,000 works over 90 years. Pretty purposefully, So I do think we have to be flexible, we have to be open, we have to reconsider, we have to understand what is collection care versus, just things associated directly with a permanent collection. But I think it's always interesting to test things that we haven't done them. We've done things the same way over and over. It's good to kind of ask those questions. They have to ask it for themselves. They have 2 million objects. They have a whole different thing. They have to figure out their piece, and I don't want to be in judgment on them any more than they would judge our 25,000, and what we're doing.